Professor Howard Williams takes you on a journey through time and space, exploring death and memory, past and present. Archaeodeath.
Hello.
Hello, sir. How are you?
I'm okay, thank you. How are you?
I'm not bad. I have my caffeine today. I'm just drinking a Coke. I actually remembered to bring my notes today. So,
That's always good.
I feel like I'm a full-grown adult today. How are you?
Organisation with a capital O. That's what the doctor would like. Although he's not very organised himself. Hang on,
I was going to say, especially not this one. Matt Smith's doctor seems to be kind of like all over the place.
Yes, he is. He is a very eccentric. Well, they're all eccentric, but he's particularly eccentric. And a happy new year. I like that. So you're not dead.
Yes.
Happy New Year.
Yeah. I'm just pulling up my episode list right now.
I've got everything sorted. I'm just thinking that it is a Happy New Year because we haven't done a live this side of Christmas, have we? Or side of when was the last time we did a live?
Yeah, we did one for season 6.
I've totally lost track. That was only last week, wasn't it? It feels like everything goes timey-wimey, Rabbi. I feel like it's been months since we've done one of these.
You know what it is? It's because it's when you're in my presence, time stands still.
It is. Yeah, that's it.
That's what it is. That's what it is.
Or the times when we're apart seem like millennia.
There you go. I like that one better. I've got
my Sir Nabbas mug. Hello, everybody joining us.
I have my new.
Have we got anyone joining us?
And I'm.
We don't have
yes, we do. People love us. What are you talking about? We're loved by everyone.
It's quality.
Men
not
want to be
anyway.
you. Don't you remember? Men want to be you. Women want to be with you, and everyone else wants you in both ways.
Exactly. And especially when we're talking about Doctor Who, of course. You've got caffeine. I've got tea.
Yes.
Let the doctoring commence.
For those who are joining us, our usual format is we try to get through all of the episodes. We talk about our specialized, I can't think of the word.
We're going to bring our own perspectives, aren't we, to Doctor Who Season 7. In many ways, one of the best seasons ever. Certainly full of a rich range of different ways in which time and memory, death and mortality, faith and spirituality are addressed in the wider universe and on Earth in different ways, I think. I certainly think that, again, the overarching storyline is about the mortality or not of the Doctor, his own fate, his own death. We saw that with his with the Tesseract being the ultimate deception of his cremation in season 6. But now he knows that he's the whole overarching narrative arc is towards his death in season 7. So I suppose that's of interest, isn't it? And there's various individual episodes that have really powerful themes about the horror and help us reflect on mortality in different ways, I think, and faith.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And now, of course, I remember we're going to come at it from our unique and storied disciplines. If you haven't been with us before, I am Rabbi Hannah. I'm your Rebel Rabbi and also classically trained nerd. And I'm joined by Professor Howard Williams, who is a professor of archaeology at University of Chester. And is personally my personal archaeologist. He is my go-to if I have any questions about archaeology, memoriam, mortuary archaeology, or just anything in general, because who needs Indiana Jones when you have Howard Williams?
He's old hat, and I'm new hat.
So our format is usually we go through. If you have any questions, we try to answer them right at the end. We're going to try something new this time. We're going to try and condense down a little bit and allow people to maybe even come up in the box at the end for a few minutes, share some of their thoughts if we have anybody left before we say goodbye. So with that, Professor, let's get started.
Okay. We have, with season 7, the Matt Smith as Doctor, we have a full 13 episodes in the name of the Doctor, which I think, I don't know if that counts as an episode or a special. I've got lost track. I think it is one of the key episodes of, there's 14 episodes then. So we're going to start off with the Asylum of the Daleks. which is the first episode of season 7. What were your thoughts on this? Is where the Doctor has to go to, gets captured by the Daleks and sent to their planet for crazy Daleks, where they are they all the
Yes.
all the ones that have lost their trolley. They've fully peppered their pots, or one exterminate short of an invasion, or whatever the phrase for a mad Dalek is.
I find it interesting in the first place that Daleks have enough care to send their, off their trolley Daleks to any sort of hospital in the first place. But then we get a look at the hospital and you think, is it really a hospital or is it more of a prison for off their trolley Daleks? Especially when we get into intensive care where you see these Daleks are chained like to the walls and chained up. So I find the duality of, okay, so Daleks recognize that some of them are more out there than others. But in that recognition, they realize they're so dangerous that it's more of a prison. In my understanding of watching it, I see it more of a prison than I do a hospital. They're not actually helping anyone there. But we are introduced to Souffle Girl here. And
so
I think that brings a huge thought process of what is considered humanity, because does Souffle Girl realize that she is a Dalek? She does not. She still thinks she's Souffle Girl.
Yes, because the idea
and I should
is
warn people, if you haven't seen Doctor Who season 7, of course there will be spoilers, but let's be honest, it's been out for like 10 years, so
bit late now.
If you haven't seen spoilers yet, a little bit late.
I mean, I suppose the idea is that there's a nano cloud in this asylum that converts people into Daleks. So you have one of the most horrible bits is where they find a crashed ship of humanoids, and they're all skeletons apart from one that seems to be alive, and then you realise that he's a Dalek, and then you come across the actual skeletons. A classic horror moment: the skeletons of the dead crew transform into Daleks, which is a brilliantly terrifying moment, even though it's a reasonably small element of the story. But then we find out at the end that one of the crew has escaped into the asylum, and the nano cloud transforms her into a Dalek, and she is Oswin, and she doesn't even know she is a Dalek. So there's a horror of someone who actually believes there's something completely different, whether you call that a metaphor for madness, or you metaphor for not knowing one's dead in a sense, and has been converted into something else. And it's like someone who's trapped, almost like ghost-like, between worlds, and not aware of their own, the fact they are. Whether there's been many a romantic horror that's taken that line from Truly Madly Deeply to what's the film with Christopher Eccleston and Nicole Kidman in it, where the whole twist is that they're not really alive. Or there's so many versions of this
exactly, this unknowing what your actual existence is. Absolutely. The other thing is this is where I feel we start to the others. Thank you, Millicent.
The Sixth Sense as well, of course. There's many versions. The Shyamalan film. There's many versions of this, but the horror in this case is Oswin not realizing she's actually been converted into a Dalek, and for this, I also believe that this is where we start to really see just how traveling with the Doctor affects his companions. Yeah.
We know that Amy and Rory at the beginning of this, they are getting a divorce. And they are like, they're at this point where they don't like each other, and you don't know why, and you don't understand what's happening. And Rory asserts the thing that everybody has already known for a long time. In this, he states out loud, "We know that I've always loved you more than you love me." And Amy screams back that she's angry at him for even suggesting that the whole reason for her letting him go is because she cannot have any more children, and he wants a family, and she thinks it's a kindness to allow him to find someone else he can have a family with, because having Melody made her infertile, because of what they did to those awful people did to her when she had Melody. So I think we also start to see the way when you are traveling with the Doctor for a length of time, the toll it actually takes on your emotional and mental state. And to me, as I've said to you and to people who have been here a few times, I feel like because the doctor represents almost a demigod presence, of course, you're going to be in that presence for a length of time. And after a while, it is going to start to affect the way you see the world, your mental acuity, your emotional state, and you almost forget that you're human yourself. And they start kind of also taking these risks that they take, I believe, because they fully believe the doctor will be there to save them no matter what. You know, it becomes such a you've traveled with them long enough, you think you're almost impervious to whatever's going to happen, which we see a little bit later with the Angels Take Manhattan.
One final thing about the Asylum of the Daleks I wanted to flag up was the fact that we don't know at this point, but the key, the connector between this Oswin character who is dead and cannot be salvaged, and the doctor has to leave her behind. But she says, "Run, you clever boy, and remember me," and wants to be remembered. And the idea is that she's dead, but somehow the impossible girl will find the doctor and save the doctor at some point. And so there's this idea of a sort of guardian angel through time, through the timeline of the doctor, who is stalking him or protecting him. Don't take that one, take this one. We find out which she actually prompts him to take the TARDIS that will take him to the interesting places. So that's jumping ahead of ourselves, but I think it's really important that we, it sets up this idea of someone who is sort of I don't know if the guardian angel is the right phrase really, but that's my sense of it. But that memory and the fact that he needs to remember her is key.
Yes, so and the way they do a lot of use of memory within the series of Doctor Who, no matter what. They do a lot of want to be remembered, the idea of memory being something that is so important. And I think that speaks to your discipline in terms of archaeology. Isn't archaeology kind of the discipline of memory? We're pulling memories from the past and in the idea of material culture.
Absolutely.
And I would like to say, of course, we look cute. We have our matching our uniforms, as it were.
Professorially cute.
Of course. So I think that they use memory within Doctor Who as a way to touch humanity that is watching it, and kind of tap into the way we wish to be remembered as a species.
Should we move on to dinosaurs on a spaceship?
Yes, I like this one. I think it's campy. That's why I like it. It is such a campy...
It's classic temporal incongruity play, isn't it? Dinosaurs on a spaceship. I can't do a Matt Smith properly, but that kind of so silly, and yet...
Right.
Yeah, so it's...
And we get introduced to Rory's dad. I love Rory's dad.
Oh, of course. So we get Rory's dad as an extra dynamic. We have a fun play of big game hunter, Queen Nefertiti. We have dinosaurs on the spaceship because it's a Silurian ship trying to, an ark, heading out from Earth to find to populate a new planet. But it's been hijacked by this dude and his bickering Mitchell and Webb robots. Sorry. Yeah, Phil.
I said it's been hijacked by Phil.
Lots of Harry Potter, whether on purpose or accidental. There's lots of Harry Potter. Well, I never. It's like, you could. Yeah. So apart from Daniel Radcliffe not showing up, it's a classic incongruity of the idea of setting up a sort of British imperial hunting personality with a Queen of ancient Egypt. So two sort of modern stereotypes of Africa and of Egypt, particularly, or the Great Plains and Egypt, and I like the idea that it is a museum, it is an ark, it's a custodian. They're trying to preserve, botany and animals. So there's a whole curation, conservation element that plays out with it, and it's just, I think it's, and the Doctor's a real shite because he actually lets the baddie die. He engineers it. So there's a whole you see a cruel side to the Doctor where he actually realizes this person isn't worth saving. I'm going to let him be killed, which is really quite a tough one. But yes, it's got representations of the archaeological historic past in it, in the crudest of senses. You know, and the idea of curation, which is we didn't get in season 6, but we've had in earlier seasons of museums in the universe, future universities, future galleries, future museums, or versions thereof. So I like that idea.
I also love that we know that this season is going to be kind of a more serious season. They set it up in Asylum of the Daleks. So I love that they kind of use these episodes to kind of break up that seriousness and give us a little camp, give us a little classic Who, just like a temporal like adventure that doesn't really make any sense in the rest of the season, but kind of gives us a little bit of laughter and fun. Also, yes, there's some foreshadowing because the gentleman who plays the baddie in this eventually ends up playing the original Doctor. He steps in for William Hartnell, since, of course, William Hartnell has passed of blessed memory. So this actor ends up coming in and portraying William Hartnell's Doctor in future episodes.
I forgot that completely. Yeah, so yeah, I mean, whether by design or by accident, that happens a lot, both with the Doctor himself roles and various other characters. And we see that with Peter Capaldi, of course. And I think that that's the Solomon, his name is. I forgot to say that. Whether that's a deliberate biblical reference or not, I don't know. Or
that's interesting to me too. I've thought about that a lot since we watched it, whether or not they were deliberately using the name Solomon as sort of a biblical reference, given that this is supposed to be an archetype ship, and the kind of
he's
journeys,
hijacking
and I'm
it
like,
rather than
exactly. So I think that it might have been, but I might also be reading a little much into it just because of my own being in the work that I do. I would like to say that the next one, A Town Called Mercy, then strikes in a completely different tone. We're right back
very dark,
to this
actually.
Serious, dark, and almost, and I'm going to say it gives some Nazi vibes. We have this character who is doing good now, but when we find out that what he really did was he was almost like Joseph Mengele on his planet. He was doing these science experiments on his people.
Yeah, so it looks like it's going to be a sort of bit of a twee or silly little sort of Wild West episode, and the Doctor gets to wear a Stetson because Stetsons are cool, and you think it's going to be silly, but it's not. It actually is about a renegade Doctor who is, responsible for the deaths of so many, and a sort of gunfighter. But here he is seeking Rowenge. He's out to get revenge for. Not on a personal level, but because of basically crimes against humanity on a scale. And then it's about the judgments and decisions made about that. So that 19th century frontier U.S. town becomes a focus of a 20th century kind of or more 20th century moral sort of issues, and the idea of personal memory and personal guilt haunting us. We all carry our prisons with us, is the quote that I think Jack says, because their conception in their universe of their spiritual understanding of death is that when you die, you climb a mountain carrying the souls of those who you wronged in your lifetime. So it's very hyper Christian, I would say, sense of sin or guilt.
The climbing the mountain is interesting. Oh yes, the climbing. I don't know if that's.
You're talking to a rabbi. I mean, you tell me.
The weight of the souls for me is not so much Christian.
Okay.
But it does kind of speak to some of the way that Abrahamic and even Eastern religions believe in terms of how we are to enter into the afterlife. There are some Eastern religions that believe you have to meet every soul that you've harmed. And try to make good with them. So I feel like that what they did is they've kind of found a way to craft almost an amalgam of a few different ideas of afterlife from different religions spanning across the globe to create this this religious ideology that Jax has. And I like it. I love the imagery that it conveys, the idea of having to climb a mountain holding all the souls that you've wronged. Because if we take a moment and think about it, how many souls have we wronged in our lifetime? Hopefully we're not like Jax, where he's carrying what he believes is going to be almost an entire planet's worth. And then, but to have that kind of weight sit on you, I mean, even in our lives, we think about the ways that we have messed up and the people we've harmed, and it kind of sits on us like a stone. So I feel like they did a really great job in conveying that kind of religious worry about what happens to us when we're going into the afterlife.
And then we could go down and spend a whole moral episode of if I had any theological understanding or training about whether anyone who actually believed that could commit the kind of evils that this person did, or actually is it the kind of moral righteousness that this person may have once felt, we never get to see that only later do they realize they've become the kind of person that would have to carry those souls. It's difficult to know, isn't it? But it's those kind of,
yes,
does religion drive certain people to justify the unjustifiable, or would you say it's a check? Can you see it as a check against those kind of people really materializing in the first place? I mean, in terms of the Nazi Germany illusion, one could make an argument that it was an idea. It was not a religious ideology. It was a very different kind of ideology that drove that kind of inhuman treatment of others. But I'm just saying, across time, it sets up those questions. So I think it's a very, in a very light packaging, some really heavy stuff there. I feel more than actually most sci-fi.
I do too.
In that episode, yeah.
I do too. I think that and then we have the dilemma of the cyborg there at the end. He's like, I've finished my journey. I've done what I wanted to do, and I'm going to go ahead and self-destruct now because I have nothing left in me, only for the town and the doctor to say, I think you do have something left in you that, and then we pull out to that little girl who's now an adult woman talking about how, why we don't have a marshal, we don't have a sheriff, but we also have no crime in the town of Mercy. And you just see this like lone, he's there standing over, a permanent fixture watching over the town of Mercy to make sure that every generation is taken care of. But it's a heavy one, but I love it.
I just wanted to finish off by saying a quote from that where he says, where he's about to commit his own death to escape. He says, I have to face the souls of those I've wronged. Perhaps they will be kind. And that's a really interesting additional point that I haven't really thought about until I've just quoted it back at us, is the fact that he has this idea that there isn't a set weight, there isn't a set external judgment, that maybe those individual souls have agency to pass different kinds of judgment upon him, not some overall deity, that the souls of the dead themselves can show mercy. And that's what it's got a town called Mercy. There is an option, and it's really fascinating. I haven't really.
I think you're right. I like the way they weave that into the tale. Is it possible that these souls are going to be the ones who actually say, "We see that you were trying to do better," or are they going to be like, "No, no. What is exactly the weight of it going to be?" Yeah, and I like it's almost like it feels almost Egyptian to me in terms of like there was the Egyptian myth that you had to have your heart weighed, and if it balanced, then you could go into the afterlife. But if it did not, then you ended up in the Egyptian, kind of framework of hell. So, trying to balance the soul before you can enter one or the other is an interesting concept for me.
So the Wild West is here. We've talked about the Wild West before, or at least the American West, being sort of featured in Doctor Who in different ways. And I think we should, before we leave, we should talk about, yes, this is another historical setting that the Doctor Who takes us to, but here it's more just a backdrop of an isolated. I think I argued this before. I'm not sure you were totally convinced by me, but saying it. But I think it's a desert space. Lake Silencio is a kind of it's away from human habitation. This is a single settlement. It simplifies as the plot can be reduced. You've got one settlement with this cyborgian, gunslinger who can't enter the town, but is guarding the town, and it's everything's reduced to a simple. And I think that's why the plots like the Wild West or the West generally, because that idea of the depopulated landscape, which of course has, as I said before, is a colonial rhetoric, because it's not an empty landscape at all. This and in this particular plot, there's no indigeneity, there's no complications of conscience in that regard. It's about the colonial conscience of people who've arrived, coming into that space. I don't know. I thought that was, again, probably just overthinking it.
I do find it interesting that there's this one town in the middle of a landscape that there's literally what made them choose to set up there, so it does seem very desolate, and it gives way to why they would be, prey to this kind of, here's Jax, and then here comes this cyborg. There's no one else for, miles around. So I will agree with you there. So next up is we have the power of 3, and that's what we find out what happens when the doctor has to come and not do what the doctor is used to doing, and that's traveling through space and time. He kind of takes a vacation because of these cubes. He ends up spending months living with Amy and Rory, trying to see what it's like to live the other half. Instead of adventuring with them or them adventuring with him, he now gets to kind of hang out and figure out how humans live. And I find that an interesting twist in the plot, that he now has to sit and kind of realize, oh, humans are boring. They get up, they have their tea, they eat their sausage and dick in the morning, and then they get up and they go about their business.
That is not a thing in the UK, just to say. That's something you've made up in your own mind. There's no such meal.
It is spotted dick. We've talked about this.
Spotted dick is a pudding, yes. A dessert, yes.
Do you? Well, a lot of people in the US
toad in the hole, which is
too.
But there's no meal combo called sausage and dick. Okay, not that I've come across. But then there's some pretty strange places in the UK. But anyway, we're going into the realms of silliness. I don't know where we get these stereotypes of the British culture. I don't know. But then actually, with Prince Harry all over the news, I think I don't blame people, to be honest. My word. Anyway, let's not go there.
Okay. So we just have these cubes, and I feel like this also kind of talks about like human curiosity. These people, you don't know what these cubes are. They're just sitting there. People are bringing them into their homes. They're using them as paperweights, and the cubes are smart. They're just waiting. That is, I think, the plot. That this is what moves the plot, is literally their ability to be patient,
the slow invasion,
and outwait. Outwait. Like, just wait out the humans. So
it's another example of a baddie who's taking over human bodies and morphing them, and they have that horrible sort of scary. There's that horror element of, and we've talked about that as a constant throughout Doctor Who, of inanimate things or mechanoids or mannequins that come to life, snowmen. We're going to come to that in a minute. Santa Clauses, shop dummies. But also, for me, the power of this episode has nothing to do with the plot. It's the fact that it showcases some really famous Earth archaeological monuments. So you see the cubes at the Sphinx in Egypt. You see the cubes on the Great Wall of China. You see the cubes everywhere in a common British setting. And you're introduced to the Tower of London, which many people will know as the Tower of London. It's actually the White Tower is its name, and this is of course one of the most advanced pieces of military architecture built as a symbol of royal power by William the Conqueror, and is shown as the unit HQ, and they have ravens, animatronic ravens that defend it. So the ravens aren't really ravens. They, in a later episode, they go, that one seems to be going slow. Maybe it needs to change its batteries. But in this episode, you have this idea that unit are sort of living in plain sight as a special, anti-alien sort of wing of. And I like that element. So just as another one episode that showcases this world, Earth monuments as part of, and also the Tower of London as a tourist attraction, but a really important iconic monument for English history as the base for unit. And the other thing, of course, is in terms of memory, we're meeting what's her name? Stuart, the leader of unit.
Lethbridge, yes.
Is the daughter of
Catherine Lethbridge Stuart, yes.
Kate Stewart, and they sort of say, why did you drop the Lethbridge? And this whole idea of trying to, find her own way in a career. But she said, science leads. I learned that off an old friend. So the doctor is embedded in her story, and remember it. So they're my takeaways from that episode is Earth monuments, the Tower of London, Ravens of Death.
I love the episode. I love that he has to figure out how to slow down. That's the thing. And then here's Brian. Once again, we have Brian, Rory's dad, who is and he sits with him and tells him, basically you have to have a life at some point, because they're deciding, are they going to continue to run with the doctor? Because he comes to stay, but then he leaves, and then they have to go back to their life. They talk about in the beginning of this how Rory is gone for months at a time, or how Amy is gone for months at a time because they're off running with the doctor. And they have to decide, do they continue to live this life where they are adventuring, or do they slow down and have a proper human life doing the other part of their life that they love while he goes off. So I love that there's also that choice they have to make on, do we continue to do this or do we not? And ultimately, we know their choice is to continue to run, even with Brian, who says, well, someone has to stay to water the plants, because they offer to bring him along. Why don't you come with us? And he says, well, someone has to water the plants. But he finally gives his blessing to the idea that, yes, go and have these adventures while you can still have them. And we find out Brian has also been off adventuring after his time on the TARDIS seeing dinosaurs. He went off all over the world and sent back, postcards from his own personal adventures. So I also kind of like that, especially given that we're going right into the Angels Take Manhattan.
Right. Okay. This is obviously such a complex episode, but it's all about time and the Angels sucking people back through time, and they've taken over the whole of Manhattan. They've taken over the Statue of Liberty, so they have a giant angel. They have horrible little cherubs tittering around and freaks the living out of you. So it's the angels are the bad guys, and they're sucking people back through time, stealing their life, so people live themselves to death.
Same place. Right, and you notice that they're sucking back to this. They have a base, yeah.
And they have a base, and they're basically keeping people in a hotel of their own slow death. Mm-hmm. So they're creating their own prison within New York. So the whole taking of Manhattan is the taking of the island of Manhattan and turning it into a massive time sieve or time sucking thing.
It's a time suck. Yeah,
we're just making this up.
And I love that we have this kind of like pulp fiction noir, is like the old pulp magazines. We have Melody Malone as a detective who is,
and we think it's really song and it's not. Yeah.
We see this moment where he rips out the last page of the book because he says he hates endings. He doesn't want endings. That way, if he doesn't read the last page, it never ends. And that very much speaks to the way that he sees that the doctor interacts with the world in general. He never wants to see the endings. He doesn't stick around for the endings. And as we know here, this is what I meant when I said we're going to come up to the Angels Take Manhattan, is where we find out that both Rory and Amy have developed this. They've leaned on the doctor so much they believe that whatever they do, the doctor's going to save them. There's Rory standing up on the edge of this building because he knows if he jumps, there's a paradox because he's already been sucked back. So if he dies here, then everything goes away and everything will be fine. And she gets up there and says, no, if we do everything together. But if you notice, it isn't Rory that the doctor says, come down off the ledge. He's like, Amy, what are you doing? What are you doing? And they're like, well, everything's going to be fixed. And you see them jump together. So I think they've also come like, well, here's one more adventure that we'll figure out how to get out of, only to find out it's not really an adventure. Both of them get out of in a way that they're used to. They're okay, we know that when we come to the end of it, Rory sees his his name on in that specific graveyard, which I know is one that you wanted to touch on. And then you turn around and there's Amy. And Amy, we have the doctor begging Amy to stay. We'll figure it out. We'll go back, but if you do this, this is a fixed point in time. We've come to learn fixed point in time to mean he can't go back and change anything. So if you go back now, I can't do anything about it. And she finally, this is to me her redemption. She has had this back and forth, in my opinion, of who does she love more, the doctor or Rory? The doctor or Rory? And she has to now make the choice. Who is she going to spend her life with? Is it going to be adventuring with the doctor, or is it going to be Rory? I think she made the right decision. And clearly they're fine. Yes, they get thrown back into the 1930s, but they live out a life where they're happy and completely, where they should have been in the first place, which is with each other. But then he has to face the ending. He loses Amy, who, as he has pointed out, has kind of been stitched in there since she was tiny, come along pond. And now he has to figure out how to go on without his bestest friend in the world, which we kind of see what happens in the Bells of St. John. So I know that there is some graveyard paraphernalia. Is that the right word for it? Probably not.
Yeah.
That appear in this episode.
I suppose for me, what's really interesting is that there's two things from an archaeological point of view. That the horror of the angels is they are sculptures, public art. They are. But they're also funerary art. The angel as a weeping figure on traditional, particularly British, but I think also it's an international thing of funerary commemoration. But therefore they've fold the graveyard into the story. So the graveyard is the place where the angels finally get their revenge on Rory and Amy and suck them back through time. The last angel gets away, and so the angel is the churchyards are somewhere where angels can hide. And we're going to come back to that later, as in future episodes I don't think you've seen yet, where the angels lurk in graveyards again, but also in public spaces. So it can be any art, and that comes from the very origin. The first story of the angels is the fact they can be any public art. So there's that element, but it's also, I like the fact that they used a Welsh cemetery transposed into New York. So it's Llanelli Cemetery. I've just checked while you were talking. There's Box Cemetery in Llanelli in West Wales, in Carmarthenshire, a county I know very well. I used to work in that county, and Llanelli is a much maligned but actually quite nice place, and it's a very Welsh looking cemetery. That's why I find it quite funny. If it's like this is clearly not American cemetery architecture, but it fits with the angel theme of what the angels are, that they are very British, not Victorian sort of motif of death, and so I like the fact that and it's a really powerful episode with the very fact that the gravestone marking more than the book is the one way in which time is told and history is told, but the gravestone is of one's own gravestone is the clear sign of their own victimhood of the angels. So they become sort of sucked back through time and their names appear on the gravestone. So I think that's really powerful and poignant and really interesting. I haven't got my head around it, but beyond that, I should also say there is an archaeological object, because we have another crime boss type character with a collecting fetish. It's a cliche of fiction. There's always a crime boss with a collecting fetish, and he's full of Chinese early Qin dynasty vases. It's another, it's another, baddies collect art is true in all, and it's like the idea of the archaeologists have a bad rap in fiction, but nowhere near as bad as collectors, because collectors are always up to something rotten, whether it's Bond villains or it's,
Marvel villains.
They're always collecting old shit. Watch the Watchmen, Ozymandias, it's everyone, whether it's actual superheroes or parodies of superheroes, it's the original comic. Ozymandias is obviously the bad guy, but he also collects loads of antiquities. This is part of our supervillain backstory, but he doesn't. He is, yeah. I mean, he ends up not being the supervillain because it's the angels, but it's so like and that's really interesting because it's almost like the art comes to get him, the sculpture comes to get him. He tries to collect stuff, he tries to trap an angel, and the art gets him back. So it's almost, you could almost see it as a post-colonial retribution of the objects against the people who tried to collect them. But I think that may be overthinking it a little bit too much. But I like to think of that.
I'm kind of here for that. I'm kind of here for that opinion. Plus, I do like to see that we have the way that River Song interacts with this particular version of the Doctor. He and her, he knows she's about to break her wrist, and he's like, you have to get it out there without breaking her wrist, and she does anyway, because she knows she has to, but hides it from him. They have a fight over it, and then he heals her because he loves her, and she's mad at him. How dare you, waste regeneration energy like on me? And he's like, just like completely flabbergasted and like overwhelmed by her. And then she's just like, yes, that's marriage, dear. And their dynamic is so fitting to me. And a lot of fans didn't care for it in the beginning because we have Alex Kingston, who at the time was, a woman in her 50s. We have Matt Smith, who was one of the younger doctors to ever take the role of Doctor Who. And we're supposed to see these two together as a married couple, and people are like, that's gross. And I'm like, I think what people find gross about it is they believe that women lose their sexuality, their sensuality, and their desire when we hit our 30s. And the idea that someone younger than us would find us desirable is outrageous. So I kind of like these two together. I love Peter Capaldi and her together later on, but I do enjoy their dynamic. And Matt Smith said it was an honor to be able to portray the husband of Alex Kingston. That kissing Alex Kingston was one of the best things he's ever gotten to do in his career. And I'm like, I just want to beat his ass for that. But that's just me.
So, anything else, or shall we?
I think we're on to the snowmen.
Oh, can I just say one extra? Oh no, forget that. No, yes, the snowmen. The snowmen. It's the plural, isn't it? Because there's the great intelligence mobilizing
who we see
snow.
Before.
Yes, it says a repeat character played by the wonderful, and his name has escaped me. What the heck is his name? Oh
my
actor.
Gosh.
With Northern Eye. My brain's anyway, it doesn't matter. The great intelligence played, it's going back to Victorian times, snow, Victorian times, it's a combo, Dickensian, Simeon dies but is raised from the dead and in symbiosis with the great intelligence. And we're introduced to Clara again.
Richard E. Grant,
of course. Sorry for that momentary.
No, it's okay.
And again,
we learn you never can trust snowmen.
You can't. Another scary. Never trust snowmen. Never trust. Don't believe those Christmas, type cartoons. And other things. No, it's never right. Snowmen are another thing that will kill you. And we're introduced to Clara again, and we get to see her tombstone, and then the jump in time. So the graveside funeral is represented, which I think is really important. Remember me, for we shall meet again. And so It's another great Victorian funeral scene. We've seen Victorian funerals in the Cybermen episode with the next Doctor. So we're getting another Victorian cemetery scene. So they're in and out of Victorian Welsh cemeteries a lot of the time. I haven't checked where they filmed this one, but I bet it's a South Walian cemetery. So I think the funeral, the cemetery, the South Walian cemetery is a repeat environment for filming Doctor Who. Yes.
For me, I think this highlights how in our childhood, when we are formed out of loneliness, we kind of create our own reality. And that's sort of what this Richard E. Grant does as a child. Like, we know the great intelligence has taken on a form of its own, but it was really born out of this young boy's loneliness and need for friendship and need to be accepted as a peer. And the only peers he had were building these snowmen. We find out later it's really was him as a child who has kind of taken over and created the great intelligence, which, if you have watched old Who, is a recurring character. He has gone against a few other doctors in the original series. So it was nice to see. It was very nice to see an older, not Submarine, not Dalek, but an older bad guy come back into the revised series. And I love that we see he's taken the loss of Amy and Rory very hard. At the opening of this, he's parked his TARDIS at the top of a tree and is just there. He's refusing to participate in life. He's said, forget it, I'm done. I'm just going to wither away in my TARDIS alone. A lonely boy in a box. And then here comes our Clara Oswald, who says the one word that will pull him out of it, and it's pond. One word, and it's literally pond. And you see him, suddenly he's got on the glasses we know that were Amy. She was wearing these reading glasses, much like our professors here, and puts them on, and suddenly he's back to work, and he realizes he cannot escape the role that he has in the universe, which is to be the Doctor. So that is definitely my takeaway. We know that the great intelligence does not just go away. In this particular episode, we encounter the great intelligence later on. But Richard E. Grant is beautiful. We also have the voice is done by our Ian McKellen. How can we not love Ian McKellen? I absolutely adore that man. So I don't know if you have any other thoughts on the snowmen.
No.
Except that Clara once again dies and says the same thing. Run, you clever boy, and remember.
So yes, the next one I want is the Bells of St. John, which is back to planet Earth, 21st century.
And never trust Wi-Fi.
Never trust Wi-Fi. So this is really anxiety, and for any of us who use Wi-Fi,
it is for me.
Your soul is going to be sucked into like a ghost. And of course, there's the joke of human souls trapped like flies in the World Wide Web, stuck forever, crying out for help. And Clara goes, "Isn't that basically Twitter?" which I've used many a times on Twitter against other Twitter users. But yes, I mean, I think it is, or you could say TikTok if you wanted to be mean. So there's two things here. First, it's another way in which people are trapped outside their bodies in some kind of the horror of liminality, the horror of not being dead, not being in an afterlife, but being trapped between worlds. That's the one big theme. The other theme is we have a medieval theme of the Doctor is in a Cumbrian medieval monostery, waiting for the phone call in 1207.
Yeah,
so there's a medieval theme.
A monk. I love it. I love monasteries no matter what. I love any kind of monastery. So
we've seen monasteries as a setting before for futuristic, the flesh being made in a factory set up within the ruins of a monastery. We've seen the headless monks, again, monastic themes. They love monastic themes.
Mm-hmm.
And they have a great ambivalence towards monastic orders. But these are quite nice monks. But they're just the monk.
They are, and they know he's not a monk. That he's off his rocker.
Yes,
they even talk about how they know he's off his rocker, and then suddenly he gets the phone call.
He's a mad monk. He's and then the other thing about this episode for me, beyond the storyline, I'm just talking about the material culture, is it's another showcase of British ancient monuments, historic monuments, St Paul's Cathedral, the Houses of Parliament, and then matching that up with one of the more iconic buildings of London, the Shard Tower, which I think is blooming horrible, but everyone keeps banging on about it like it's something special. But anyway, the point is you have ancient and modern architectures are featured as integral to the plot, and I think that's really interesting. But beyond that, I don't think there's a lot I have to say other than I don't like the idea of souls being trapped in the internet. It's. I feel what if that happened to me right now, and I was forced to sit here talking about Doctor Who for eternity, wearing a scarf. Well, could be worse, I suppose. Eating sausage and whatever.
Sausage and
anyway,
toad in a hole. I'll be polite. So for me, what is interesting in this is then, of course, we see Clara again. She has a password that she's made a mnemonic of, and that mnemonic is "Run, you clever boy. Run, you clever boy, and remember." And he says, "Wait, what did you say?"
Yes,
and she's like, that's my password.
Yeah.
You know, and that's where he started
to realize,
yes,
the password, isn't it?
Yeah. And he says, wait a minute. Why is there something happening here that, why do I recognize this voice, this person?
Yeah.
So, and how did you get my number? Like, how were you able to call the TARDIS? So for me, it's just like this, clearly she is something that is a fixed part of his timeline. And the Wi-Fi thing utterly scares the ever-loving shit out of me, if I pardon my Hebrew. But yes, I'm like, oh, don't trust Wi-Fi.
I mean, Hebrew in this these lives. It's quite
a lot of Hebrew in this one. I've noticed that you and I make this list of what we cannot trust in terms of never trust a monk,
never trust the Wi-Fi, never trust mannequins, never trust.
We can't trust nuns and wimples. Yeah, so every season we tend to add to this list, and this is now don't trust your Wi-Fi.
Yes, never trust it.
I love that it's the beginning kind of their adventure together. We see how their dynamic is going to go, and so I do enjoy that. But the next one is more Rings of Ackleton.
Pyramid of the Rings of Akhenaten, isn't it? So the episode's called the Rings of Akhenaten, which is basically an Egypt in outer space mixed with various other spiritual. And the idea is of 7 planets all believing that life originates at this point, and they've got this temple, and every 1,000 years, species of these 7 planets and perhaps from farther afield come together to make a festival of offerings and to the old god, the sleeping god. And the idea is that they are singing to feed it mementos, stories. And we find this is a culture in which monetary value is the stories and the precious things. Objects have value because of the things, the stories. So it's very much like a sort of anthropological stereotype of the Melanesian societies and the Kula ring exchange system of things have value through the stories that they hold. But it's also taken with the idea of an ancient Egyptian creature that needs to be appeased, and actually sacrifices made to it. And it's basically a mummy / vampire that's sucking away the souls of the Queen of Years, the girl that is the sacrificial offering. Yeah. So it's really quite sinister, really. But the Doctor gets around it in the end by realizing that the vampire is not the old god. It is just a messenger, and that the real old god is the sun itself. And the Doctor gets around it by offering it more memories than it can cope with, by giving it all the TARDIS's time.
Yes.
So he is able to stuff it to the saturation point with the stories and the memories it holds. So that's the Doctor becomes a saviour. Sorry, am I babbling on a bit too much? But I just, for me, obviously the interest is it's Egypt in outer space with a mummified, ancient, sleeping deity that becomes more than it is. But it's memories and stories that are the exchange currency of these societies, but the thing that God needs. You're not giving up blood, or it's something deeper. It's your actual soul.
Yes, exactly. For me, there is some biblical context of the idea of child sacrifice, because there is some belief that in certain biblical times and certain pagan belief system that there were child sacrifice given to old gods to appease their anger and keep them from ruining cities and the people. So to me, it does smack of kind of that sort of ideology. I do believe that it, like you said, it is very much like an Egypt in space, and the writers once again have the ability. Or are we standing? I'm for that.
I just need to stretch around a bit, yeah. But you don't have to. You don't have to copy me.
No, it's okay. The writers once again have taken and well crafted this idea that religion in and of itself can be used for good or harm, which we know in society is true as it is. And this religion does prey on the memories and the things that are of vital importance to someone as their currency. I find that interesting.
Yeah. And the other thing, of course, about this episode is the medium of communication being singing, and almost like a hymn to the god. And I thought that's really really interesting.
I also would like to say that it is the scarification, like the look of the people with the markings on them does kind of smack to me of indigenous culture, especially throwbacks to certain African cultures that do have the scars on their bodies for certain life events.
But might we say, I don't know, people may disagree with me. I don't know if we have an audience left anymore. We've got a few people, but hello. But I would say that given the controversies about cultural appropriation in representing alien species and ancient cultures, non-Western cultures are being at the forefront of everyone's discussions with the Avatar movie, which I haven't seen. I've got no intention of seeing really. I didn't enjoy the first one, but could one say that this is actually an episode? Well, obviously it's quite shamelessly taking from ancient civilization ideas and non-Western culture representations. It's actually not a totally derogatory and.
Oh no, I don't think so either.
I think it's actually quite a. If you wanted an example of one that I think where there's a lot of nuance and you can actually get something out of it, even down to the fact that they think that an alien is being aggressive by barking at her, and it's actually just its way of communication. And the doctor barks back, and they start a dialogue about hiring speeders, whatever they are hiring. So you get a sense of things that are alien and scary are actually just different, and there is a baddie because there are a whole system of different cultures that are bedded into this idea of indulging this sun, this greedy sun. So it's horrible, but it's not. I don't know if it's totally patronising and colonial in its framing. I don't know.
I don't think so either, but I just do think that they scoured around to see what they could come together to create this kind of religious ideology for this specific people. I don't think it was done, and I don't think it was malicious at all. I think that brings us to the Cold War, which is, to me, is just another kind of fun episode.
Yeah.
I like it. I love that we have a guy who's dressed like the iconic kind of Captain Nemo that we see, in 20,000 Leagues, and he loves 80s music because this is taking place in 1984. Yes. And how do you not love, that kind of? I do. I love it. I loved him as a character in general, and I've always loved David Warner as, an actor. And so this one to me is just kind of a fun one. It's not really one that is, moves along, except other than we now have Clara as a permanent fixture as the Doctor's companion. So I do like that.
Yeah, so it's the idea of an ancient, a single ice warrior is trapped in ice, uncovered, and comes to try. Thinks he can start World War III. But at the end of the day, the ice warriors are space Vikings. They're the warrior code martial barbarians. They're another form of cheap Cyberman. Another way, they're a kind of spin-off of the Silurians. And I think I may have said when watching this that I think that I'd love to see a fight between the Silurians as the ancient Earth species of reptilian and the Mars, the Ice Warriors, who are the ancient Martian sort of lizard people. But anyway, that point aside, I think this is basically space Vikings with a warrior code and one of their leaders who's got an ego trip, and they have to convince not to destroy the planet, and it's good. But nothing I need to dwell on.
For me, I like the fact that he laments the loss of his daughter. He realizes that by the time he's been found, his family is gone. True. So I do like the feeling of loss in that, but I do feel this is another one of those episodes where it's meant to be kind of fun, a little campy, not too serious, because we're going to be getting into more serious ones as we progress, including going into Hyde.
Now this is a really interesting episode for issues of time because it plays on
Plus it has Doug Gray Scott. How can we not love Doug Gray Scott?
Fantastic.
I know you haven't seen Ever After because you're terrible, but
Thank you. Thank you.
When I first saw him, the first time I saw Doug Ray Scott was introduced to him as an actor was in Ever After, where he plays the French Prince, which is basically a retelling of Cinderella. And he does a phenomenal job. And then he does a great job in this. We see an older Doug Ray Scott. He's kind of settled. You know, he almost has. I love his character in this because he seems like he's settled into the idea that he's going to be a lonely human being, and he's kind of made peace with this. And you feel sorry for him. At the same time, you kind of are hopeful that maybe he's wrong. And so I love that kind of betrayal he brings to this particular episode. And I like ghost stories anyway.
It's a ghost story. It's a ghost story with sci-fi explanation. Basically, this is a Caliban house. There's the ghast of Caliban house is a ghost that appears. It's been seen, and we're in the 1970s doing ghost hunting. But they know that this ghost has been seen for thousands of years. There's Saxon folklore, whatever the heck that is, records the ghost, and later periods record the ghost. So we have this idea of, through time, this location has been haunted by this ghost. And then we find out it's not a ghost at all. It's a future time traveller, Earth time traveller, trapped in a pocket universe, trying to escape. And then, in addition to that, we get the other twist. There's an alien species that they think is in this pocket universe trying to harm the space traveler, but it's trapped there too, and it wants to get back to the house because its lover, partner, wife, husband, we never know which is which, is also there. So it's another reconnecting story, which is a nice, charming additional flip. The other thing I need to say about this is the outdoor scenes are filmed at the Cistercian monastic ruins in South Wales at Margam. So another Margam just about counts on the border of West Wales. I'm not sure if it's West Wales or South Wales. Let me think about that one. Let's say South Wales. Margam is a beautiful site. So you see the monastic ruins at the end, but so it has that haunted Gothic horror aspect to the house.
I love that.
And then the actual medieval ruins come in at the end. So I think there's lots of sort of archaeological, historical, a backdrop to this, to the story of a ghost that is working on a different time span, and so is actually just a few seconds of running are being seen over thousands and hundreds of years as the ghast of Caliban House. Yeah, love it.
You know what it reminds me of? There was a show back in the 90s, early 2000s. It was a teenage show called Erie, Indiana. And there was an episode of this where this child, he's so used to having to do daylight savings time that even though he moved to Indiana, they don't do it. He does it anyway. So he finds himself 2 seconds behind the rest of the world. And it kind of has that feeling to me. This person is stuck in a pocket of time. And so we're seeing these images kind of coming through that we perceive as a ghost, as we would. I do like, they did a neat wrap up with Doug Ray, of course, being the person who says he loves this other person. And you find out that the person being stuck is actually their great grandchild in their lineage.
Completely. We wish we did.
That's why there's both of us. That's why there's the two of us.
And of course, the other thing that's an interesting play on that would confuse people, of course, is that person has an appearance that in our eyes is of a different ethnicity and that would therefore is challenging our modern senses. I think that's almost like it's a sub point of, subverting our fixed ideas, or some people's fixed ideas.
And I love that. Tone. I personally think that's beautiful.
There's a lot patched into this episode. Yeah,
there is, and I think it sets us up for like Journey to the Center of the TARDIS.
Yeah. Okay.
That one. Okay, so I'll be honest. Journey to the Center of the TARDIS is a wild. It's like the writers took an acid trip, and then wrote this episode. They were like, "We're bored today.
I think,
and we're gonna drop some acid. We're gonna write this episode, and everyone's gonna love it." Because I have a huge issue trying to follow it. I've seen it more than once, and I'm still like, okay, so.
I mean, to explain it, the TARDIS accidentally gets caught by a salvage team, who are going to try and the Doctor then has to convince these three brothers, who've lost their father, but they're three brothers in space on this sort of they're trying to take the TARDIS as salvage. He tries to help them to go and save Clara in the TARDIS, but the TARDIS is breaking up. Time is leaking into each other, so they end up meeting deformed versions of themselves. It's all a bit messed up, as you say, acid trip. The other thing that's nothing to do with archaeology that does make me uncomfortable about this episode is I realise how many, every time, and the BBC puts effort in, has constantly been criticised and constantly put effort into casting black actors, British black actors, and sometimes American black actors, but black. And every time they do it, they have to make them morons, or they have to give them this kind of patronising street. Oh, what's this? Why is that? Oh, I don't know. And it's just it. Even at the time, 10 years ago, this was just like, oh God, do you have to? Every black actor has to be some kind of inner city moron, and they do this again
starting
in
with
series.
Mickey.
And yeah, Mickey. Well, Mickey is a moron. He's like, but yeah, it really annoys me because these three brothers are. They could have played that really differently. They're in outer space running a whole spaceship. They've got a father they've lost.
They have to have skills in order to do that and survive.
Skills,
exactly.
Yeah. And they're not shown as dumb, stupid, but they're shown as a bit like, they're being told they're going into a time machine and they don't get it. They're just ripping stuff off walls, like basically baboons off a car going through Longley.
I do not like the way they treat these really characters at all.
Yeah, that's
to me
the thing.
Too. I will absolutely agree with you.
But
I've noticed they've done that with a lot of the black actors that we see who are cast in Doctor Who at this time. They don't give them the kind of meaningful roles that they give to actors who are not black. And it bothers me a great deal. Like with these brothers, we know they're clearly intelligent. They have their own salvage team. They know how to run this ship. But then we're led to believe that they don't understand. Don't touch anything because you might rip a hole. We're led to believe they don't understand that their singular focus is salvage to the point that they are willing to risk their own lives. That
the
doesn't
doctor
seem
said, "Don't take it.
Probable.
The TARDIS will fight back," and they just go, "Oh yeah, whatever." And it's like they are.
Yeah, I don't believe that. I think that they did a disservice there with this particular episode.
So
and this episode is a little scary to me in terms of I think because the way that it's put together, I'm like. Yeah, so I like it, but I'm also like, it's not one of my favorites.
It's a messed up episode. I think it has a lot of potential.
It is to me too. I do. Strangely enough, I like the Crimson Horror.
It's ridiculous. Mrs. Gillyflower and Mr. Sweet. Oh, that's horrible. Basically, you find out at the end it's some basically ancient Silurian red leech that's basically somehow found it in the canal and it's suckered onto her and it's basically getting her to release the Crimson Horror via rocket. It's a ridiculous plot from the chimney of a Victorian factory in 1893 in Yorkshire, Bradford Mill, to change the world into what is the plot? I can't even remember that, but it's great. It's just a classic Victorian.
New Eden, Adams and Eves.
So the whole parallel.
And it's Diana Rigg.
It's Diana Rigg being scary, just like she is in Game of Thrones.
Oh, I love it.
And so Diana Rigg is basically engineering the planet to, this horrible leech is going to take over everybody. But the idea is a spiritual parallel. She sees it as a new Jerusalem.
Radicalism.
Yeah.
She does. It's total religious radicalism.
Yes.
And I think when we watched this, I said, well, she must have Jerusalem syndrome. Which, for the 7 people who are here, thank you for still being here, is a phenomenon. It's a mental phenomenon where some people have traveled to the Holy Land and thought that they have been picked as the new Messiah. They believe that they're a prophet. It has happened more often than not. In fact, David Koresh, unfortunately, was someone who was believed to have Jerusalem syndrome. And I feel that Diana Rigg kind of plays to that. Yes. I'm going to have a new Jerusalem. I'm going to have a new Eden. I'm going to have my Adams and my Eves, and the whole world is going to bow to the way that I want it to go. Perry, we are discussing Matt Smith's season 7. That's where we're at right now.
And the other mortuary superstition that's played into this episode is the idea that the dead will have captured in their eyes the last thing they see, which is characterized in this episode as a Romany superstition. So there is there's a Victorian. They're doing this classic thing of Victorian age, a time of transition between superstition, here characterized as Romany superstition, and a time of science and progress. But someone who is being driven against science, this idea that science is corrupting, that industry is corrupting, that living in the squalor and the pollution, and that's why the canal, that the leeches in the canal is not incidental, that it's in the canal, in this, one of the mechanisms of the Industrial Revolution, the canal system, but also a polluting space that this horrible creature from the ancient world is able to emerge out of. So that it's really good at capturing that sort of those different, mashing together lots of different aesthetics about how we characterize the Victorian era as a time of science, progress, industry, but also of religious fervor reacting against this and pulling back against and then suggesting
the idea of the Industrial Revolution is evil, and we have to have a better, more controlled way of life. Absolutely.
And key to this, I have to say, is the idea of the utopian settlement, that obviously in the 19th century, many industrialists were playing with the ideas of creating ideal working conditions. And so Sweetville, the town being created, the New Jerusalem, Sweetville, is like Saltaire in Bradford. It is like a model village. And there are other ones across, there's ones in the US too, these industrialists who say, my workers will live in pure moral conditions if I create nice houses. So it's this utilitarian ideal that environment will make moral subjects of the workers. So I think it's really well done and plays on those genuine historical, like utopian ideals, religious zeal, anxiety about technology and industry, and of course it's got Strax and it's got
Madame Vashta
and Jenny, of course, yes, and so there's it's a brilliant episode, yes.
And then it does take us, of course, to Nightmare in Silver, which has Warwick Davis. And how can you not love a Warwick Davis?
He's brilliant, isn't he?
He is brilliant. He
should
is
be Prime Minister, frankly, not Emperor of the blooming universe, Imperator.
Exactly. I can't even vote. But I would become a British citizen if Warwick Davis wanted to be Prime Minister, just so I could vote for him.
Then you'll have to change your dietary requirements as well.
Listen, I refuse to eat dick for breakfast. It's not happening.
Same here, but you just made this up. So the new mythologies of British cuisine of what you think we. It's like
Listen,
an episode of Blackadder,
later we'll talk about this, but I can prove I'm right.
Okay. Well, you could be busy editing Wikipedia to invent whole cuisines that the British eat, just to confirm your bias.
Don't tell people my end goal of my confirmation bias. I liked this episode. It was fun for me, and I love that. Okay, so here's the issue that I have with it, though. Here, Clara brings along her wards, the 2 kids she's taking care of. They're, of course, black children. And I don't like that all we're doing is putting black children in danger in this episode. Once again, we have the writers who are like, we're going to include children, but we're going to put these children in danger and pretend like these children of this age are complete idiots.
Yeah, again,
and
they're
that bothers
morons, aren't they?
Yeah. Again, we have children of color who are treated as if they don't know anything.
They're just not. They're not canny. They've got no wits about them. They just go, don't wander off. They're like,
You're 14, 15 years old. You are told, hey, we're on a planet that is scary. Don't wander anywhere. You know better than to wander somewhere. They're giving them no intelligence factor whatsoever.
Okay, I've got a couple of archaeological themes or historical themes that need to play for. Firstly, setting, Castell Coch, near the Red Castle, near Cardiff, is the setting. This wonderful medieval castle that was renovated by the Marquis of Bute and turned into this basically neo-Gothic fantasy land, and you can visit it. It's a Cadw property, so that's where they filmed. So this amusement park with the castle they're defending against the Cybermen attacking is in a genuine medieval castle that has been turned into a fantasy castle in the Victorian age. So I thought that was wonderfully selected film location. The other major historical allusion, of course, is to the Earth Empire, which is basically Rome in outer space, and that Warwick Davis is basically a Roman emperor style character, isn't he? He's got a massive forces, massive, and the only way he beats the Cybermen is by destroying whole galaxies and galaxy clusters. Actually, to just basically you can't win. They always upgrade, so you basically just have to destroy planets, destroy solar systems, destroy as the only way that the humans survive, because otherwise the Cybermen will take over. That's not particularly Roman, but I mean, I suppose the Roman bit is the imperial title, imperial garb, and that whole thing. Beyond that, I think it's a great episode. Yeah, I don't like the kids. I don't like kids in most things. Ever since I think I watched the Western Shane at too young an age, and I think all kids in films, the kids in Jurassic Park are, should have been eaten by velociraptors. We all know it. Yeah, that's all I can say. What? Is that outrageous?
You were like, the children need to be eaten. I'm like, don't
turn them into Cybermen.
You have children.
Yeah, but if they were so dumb as to wander off when I told them not to wander off, frankly, I would mourn their passing, but think, well, you know what? Did tell them.
Oh.
Goodness. Wheat from the chaff. Natural selection.
This one, I love how Warwick Davis is. Like, that's the highlight for me. Is Warwick Davis. Just seeing him as this emperor, and he's just
trying to escape his role, because that's why he's there.
Ambiguous. Yeah, he doesn't want to deal. Like, I love that. Now, I do have a question. So we're up to the name of the Doctor. Are we going to do the name of the Doctor and the day of the Doctor to finish out today, or are we going to stop at the name of the Doctor?
I think we could stop now, or we could do the name of the Doctor. I think. I don't think we should do that. Well, that's up to
you.
I think the day of the Doctor and time of the Doctor. There's too many. These all blur in my mind because they call them of the Doctor. I think we should do the name of the Doctor, or we should stop here. But officially, I think 14th episode, the last episode of season 7.
Then I think we should stop here, because name of the Doctor and day of the Doctor to me have to go together.
Okay, right. That's fine. We should do the specials then as a separate chat.
All right. Well, once again, it was an honor to spend some time with you, Professor. I look forward to the next one. Everyone who stayed with us all this time, thank you very much. And we will see you guys again soon.
Thank you. Take care.
If you've enjoyed this Archaeodeath video, why not check out the Archaeodeath blog at howardwilliamsblog.wordpress.com.